Mapping Global Ramifications of the Syrian Civil War. Political Science Association is an academic forum. We discuss different issues in the academic field. We are organizing webinar in every month since 2022. I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Shourodip Sen, Assistant Professor, North Bengal University, and along with other speakers, Ahmed Sal Kepi, Junior Research Fellow, Department of International Relations, South Asian University, Shaunak Boiddo, Senior Research Fellow, Department of International Relations, South Asian University, Sayantan Bandyopadhyay, Junior Research Fellow, Center for South Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Despite their busy schedule, they have agreed to deliver their lecture to our webinar. Now, Ronit Mukherjee will conduct the webinar. Thank you, everybody. Ronit.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for the words you have just said. Without delaying it any further, I would like our chair to take on the mic and to give some uh, starting remarks on this topic to enlighten us with the with his expertise, and then I would ask I will ask the chair to take up the speakers one by one and allocate them around 15 minutes. After the speakers have spoken for 15 minutes each, we will go to the question answer session. So without any further delay, I would ask sir if he can start the webinar.
Thank you, Ronit, and thank you, Professor Mukhopadhyay, for the introductory. I hope I am audible, Ronit.
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you
sir,
are audible.
absolutely.
Great. Right. So, since Ronit has asked a student of strategy to chair this session, and I also believe that most of the audience today do not have a grounding in strategic studies. Let me just provide you with a framework for making sense of the conflict that is going on in Syria today. Now, that would probably help us orient ourselves to what the speakers will subsequently say. I'm sure they have prepared much more than I have. Now, the conflict in Syria, raging since 2011, has been categorized in common parlance as a, a civil war, right? And I believe that it would be sounder, if not anything, to try to think of it or try to see it as encapsulating the very insidious and often very protean forms of irregular or fourth generation warfare that we see very commonly today, especially in the 21st century. Now, the Syrian conflict, why do I call it a form of or an example of an irregular warfare? Is because it was born out of a popular discontent with President Bashar al-Assad's Ba'athist government, as you all know, as part of the wider Arab Spring revolt in West Asia and Northern Africa. And therefore, it had all the elements of a revolutionary war or wars of liberation that we have seen in the 20th century. Now, following the violent crackdown by the Syrian armed forces, the pro-democracy movement in Syria soon morphed into an insurgency, right, with the formation of resistance militias of disparate loyalties. And by 2012, the clashes between the Syrian armed forces and the militias comprising the elements of the Syrian interim government, as well as the Syrian Salvation Government, took the form of a full blown civil war that we have seen since 2012. And another layer of complexity which was added to this conflict and characteristic of contemporary irregular warfare was through the participation of the Syrian democratic forces belonging to the autonomous administration of North and East Syria and comprising the Kurdish People's Protection Units, right, or the YPG, which is also considered as a valid non-state actor. And furthermore, the participation through terror tactics of jihadist organizations like the Al Qaeda and the Islamic State, which sort of vindicates the 1878 dictum by Julius von Hartmann that where the people's war breaks out, terrorism becomes a principle of military necessity. Right? And finally, the Syrian conflict also serves as a contemporary example of a proxy war wherein almost all states in West Asia and the Persian Gulf and a number of extra-regional entities like the United States and Russia, along with the Iran-backed proxies, the Hezbollah and the Hamas, as well as those backed by Turkey, such as the Free Syrian Army, have variously contributed in the brutalities to the detriment of de-escalation. Now, therefore, this particular conflict in Syria can be understood in all its complexities by situating it firmly within the paradigm of irregular warfare. That is what I believe, and it may be a possible starting point of the discussions. Now, we have three speakers lined up for today. Let's get into the more technical details of today's program. First is Ahmed Sahal. He's a junior research fellow the Department of International Relations in South Asian University. He would be speaking on from Idlib to Damascus, right? The political evolution of the Tahrir al-Sham, and Shonak Boido, research fellow, senior research fellow of the Department of International Relations again of South Asian University. He will be speaking on the regional dimensions of the Syrian civil war, relations with Palestinian liberation. And finally, we have Shantan Bandyopadhyay, a junior research fellow of the Center for South Asian Studies in SIS, JNU, and he would be speaking on From Collapse to Consequences, the fall of Assad through an Indian lens. Now, with these remarks, let me invite Mr. Ahmed Sahal to present his paper. Ahmed, if you're here, then kindly begin, and you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Chair, other professors and scholars. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank West Bengal Political Science Association to give such a wonderful opportunity to talk on a very important topic, the contemporary events and developments in Syria. So my topic is From Idlib to Damascus, the political evolution of Hayat Tahrir Sham. As we all know, Tahrir Sham is the group behind the current Syrian takeover or Damascus takeover. So I would be focusing on how it originated and how it evolved, the transformation behind that. So this transformation or rise of Hayat Tahrir Sham represents, as I understand, one of the most significant developments in Syria's civil war. So it evolved first from an Al-Qaeda affiliate to its present position. It's not actually, when we look at the Tahrir Sham and its territorial expansion, it's not just a territorial expansion. It demonstrates actually a significant shift in how militant groups or these terrorist or jihadist groups can adapt and evolve in modern conflicts. So unlike there were many groups in Syrian civil war. As we know, in the beginning, there were hundreds of groups. From all those groups, what makes Tahrir Sham unique is its like adaptation in both its military strategy and its political approach. So this ability of the jihadist movements to transform on a deeper level has been often denied in our current academic scholarship. So I am presenting Tahrir Sham as a case to counter this viewpoint. So departing from earlier assertions that terrorist organizations are generally not interested to experimentation or change or transformation, now there is a growing literature which focuses on the capacity of these militant movements for flexibility, for innovations, and other transformation. So I'll be trying to situate Tahrir Sham here. So when we look at the early evolution of Tahrir Sham, like what was it in the beginning? As we all know, it started after the Arab Spring in 2011, and the group was named then as Jabhat al-Nusra. At that time, the current leader of Tahrir Sham, or the current leader of transitional government in Syria right now, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, or his real name Ahmad al-Shara, he was actually a member of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's ISIS back then in Iraq. So he was a proper, like a jihadist or a tie with Al-Qaeda or like-minded ideology. So during the Syrian civil war broke out after 2011 Arab Spring, Baghdadi actually sent the Jolani into Syria to start a jihadist group, and that was named as Jabhat al-Nusra. So Jabhat al-Nusra was the first organization of which later evolved into Tahrir Sham. So leader of Jabhat al-Nusra was Jolani. Later on, there were problems between ISIS and this Jabhat al-Nusra when the ISIS formed a caliphate, when they declared that we are a caliphate now. And Jolani said, we don't adhere to that principle of caliphate, and our allegiance is with Al-Qaeda organization. So that was a major first transformation of Jabhat al-Nusra. First, it was a part of ISIS, then it was a part of Al-Qaeda. Later on, after 2015, it formed a new organization by joining other outfits, and it named it as a Jabhat Fatah Sham. During that time, it actually declared that we are cutting our ties with Al-Qaeda also. We want to focus only on Syria, and we are not interested in global jihad, and we focus locally only on Syria. But it was not something like we hate Al-Qaeda or we hate their jihadist ideology, but it was like focusing on Syria and cutting ties with Al-Qaeda in a peaceful manner. But later on, again, they had problems with the ideologies of Al-Qaeda. They fought against each other, and Al-Qaeda formed a new organization in Syria named Hurasuddin, and Jabhat Fatah Sham again evolved into a new organization in 2017 named as Hayat Tahrir Sham, and it also actually fought with Al-Qaeda. So the cutoff with Al-Qaeda was actually a real thing later on, although initially it was just for namesake. Later on, it became more real in the sense. So this evolution is very interesting from a pure ISIS group, aligned group into an Al-Qaeda group, and then cutting off ties with Al-Qaeda, and then forming a group called Hayat Tahrir Sham, joining other groups, even those on the secular strand. And later on, after the formation of Hayat Tahrir Sham, the group actually formed a new governance apparatus called the Syrian Salvation Government in 2017. So the purpose was to help in the governance mechanisms like education, healthcare, and other process. So the main point is that the group called Hayat Tahrir Sham is very different from other jihadist organizations like Taliban or Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And we have to see it as very different and very unique to understand the current dynamics in Syria. So when we look at the current Damascus takeover, it was just 10 or some days to take the entire country. So it actually didn't come from nowhere. It came from a lot of preparation by Tahrir Sham over the past 4 or 5 years. So they have formed the Syrian Salvation Government in 2017, and they have ruled the only province which they had, the Idlib province. So they were focusing the institution building in the very specific Idlib province, and they were forming all kind of bodies like judicial bodies or healthcare sector, and even they were trying to portray a face of people like we are trying to help the people. And this Abu Muhammad Jawlani started visiting internally displaced Syrians, the tribal leaders, then telling the people that you are one among them, or this region is for all the people, and such language usage became a major phenomenon during that time after the Syrian Salvation Government. Before, the usage was mostly regarding the Sharia or Jihad or such terms, but later on, the language usage changed in a very dramatic way, and he started integrating roads, shopping complexes. So it was mostly in a governance sense. They invested a lot in the Idlib province, which was their first province, which they took from Bashar al-Assad regime. So one thing we have to mind that Tahrir Sham does not believe in liberal democracy or popular sovereignty. That's very obvious. But still, the group tries to frame the state building project as inherently a population-wide or population-led effort. In one of his address, Jolani has mentioned that we are all in one institution. We all have authority. We are all the people. We are all one. Such kind of language usage. It's very important to understand the group, how it portrays and how it propagates its ideology. So they tried to integrate various segments of society into their governance mechanism, and it was like trying to look like a whole of society approach. So trying to construct the road. So we have to understand the Damascus takeover. If we have to understand, we have to go back to these mechanisms which happened in the Idlib province. So they were, when they took on later on the provinces, they tried to implement the similar mechanisms in provinces. So institution building, as I said, it was in practice before the offensive. Then after the offensive, when we look at how Tahrir Sham took the first cities. First, it was Aleppo, which was the second largest city in Syria. It is very city which is having a lot of wealth and other historic significance. So soon after the takeover, they were trying to fill the void which was left by the previous regime, because regime government mechanisms, they fled quickly, and Tahrir Sham tried to fill that void very quickly. Like they started to bring the traffic police and try to distribute bread, or it might be not happening on the ground, but the public, the people outside, they got the impression that something is happening. The medical resources are coming and everything is happening. A foundation called E-Clean Foundation is coming and cleaning the debris and the streets. So a lot of governance is happening by new groups, which made people to believe that this group is, maybe it might be better than Bashar al-Assad. So that in that way, they got a lot of population support, and it actually helped them to gain the way till Damascus. So even after the takeover of Aleppo, the kind of messages Tahrir Sham gave to the outside was that Aleppo is a meeting place of civilization, and we respect cultural and religious diversity. And as the chair mentioned about the Kurdish autonomous region, even Tahrir Sham, it was very surprising to the scholars, like they mentioned that Kurds are integral part of Syria. It was first time such a mentioning happens. So they're trying to portray that we are inclusive and we look forward to accommodate all of the people. And such kind of language use was very prominent. And even to the Christian community, they said, we will protect your religious structures, and you will be free to pursue your religious activities. And similar to the other communities like Druze and other minority communities. So this was as I said, it's very different from other jihadist organization, because if you look at Al Qaeda or ISIS and how they dealt with the population in general, and it is a huge difference which we see. And even how after the takeover of Damascus, how Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani as a person transformed from a military dress into a person who is wearing Western dress suit and wearing a tie and interacting with all the foreign officials. That's one thing. And another thing, the usage of flag, the change in the flag. First, it was an Islamic black and white flag. Then now it transformed into a revolutionary flag. First, it was both together. When they took Damascus, both were kept together, but later on, they removed even the Islamic flag, and it's just a revolutionary flag. So a lot of things they have changed and they have adapted. They are trying to showcase that they are They need to be seen as serious actors. And Christmas 25th and 26th is declared as a national holiday. So a lot of things is very interesting when we look at these groups, and that's why scholars like Aaron Zelin calls Tahrir Sham as political jihadis instead of Salafi jihadis, because there is usually people characterize these jihadist movement like Al Qaeda, Islamic State, and others as Salafi jihadis. But scholars now use the words as political jihadis, who are more pragmatic and who are flexible and who change when the situations change, and who try to grab more opportunities and tries to engage with officials from other countries. So generally, so my point is that we have to view this group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, not through the old lens of being part of Al Qaeda or Islamic State, even though that is a basic foundation of that group. But we have to see them as very separate to understand the evolving dynamics in Syria. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. It was very succinct and to the point and very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I believe we'll engage with you in the Q&As.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Next up is Shaunak. Shaunak shall be speaking on regional dimensions of the Syrian civil war, relations with Palestinian liberation. Shaunak, you have 15 minutes. Please begin.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks to West Bengal Political Science Association for giving me this opportunity, and also thanks to Dr. Shane for chairing this session. I have seen him quite a time in Jadavpur different department. It's a really for I'm really feeling very fortunate to have him as my chair in this session. So I'll go into my presentation with this. So, as Sahal kind of started the discussion, that the Syrian civil war, it is a very developing situation. There are turns, there are setbacks for each and every forces that are involved there. So the recent turns in Syrian civil war, that is, the effects of this turn are not limited to Syria's borders, but has wide and far-reaching implications for regional security architecture, and that is where my presentation comes in. One of the primary reasons for this view that Syria as very important in the regional security architecture is that Syria has been part of the Iran-led axis of resistance, and also Syria has been had a Russian naval base in Tartus and an air base since very long. Like these relations between Syria and Iran and between Syria and Russia has a long history. They are not new. They have been there from almost late 70s. So, this has been the main geopolitical focus regarding the current development in Syria. But if we look at the current situation in Syria, from the lens of Palestine and Palestinian liberation struggle, I think there is also quite a big effect on the struggle, on the liberation struggle of the events in Syria. This is primarily due to that axis of resistance, as I mentioned earlier, has been very important in the case of Palestinian armed liberation struggle since the late 90s and also in the 21st century. And Hamas, which is effectively the government in Gaza and been was the driving force of the October 7th attack last year on Israel, is part of axis of resistance. So is Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq. So all these actors, they are kind of strategically united in axis of resistance. But when generally the analysis happens of axis of resistance, it is implicitly taken as some kind of a monolithic block, like some NATO or something that we or the Warsaw Pact, that which has unified command structure, unified politics. But this is simply can be denied by any cursory look at the histories of all these forces who are within the axis of resistance. They have their separate origins, they have their separate histories, and also they have their own domestic political concerns which they always grapple with. So the main thing that glues together this axis of resistance is its strategic unity in limiting and challenging US and Israel's power in West Asian region and North African region also. Axis which are there with many political developments, it is not set in stone. And the axis of resistance has been one of the primary forces fighting ISIS when it came up in Iraq and Syria. They also had a very big role in Syrian civil war in the earlier stages. Hezbollah, as part of axis of resistance, intervened in the civil war. Iran provided very important diplomatic support for Syria and helped Assad to remain in power back in 2017, 2018. So, uh, but in the current context, if we see that that we see that the axis of resistance has been fully engulfed in its confrontation with Israel since 7th October last year, since the time Hamas attacked Israel. And Israel's response has been what many scholars, international organizations, some UN bodies has called genocidal actions. That has been effectively been the primary issue in the West Asian region for since that time. So what happened in this context is that the uh, members of the axis of resistance, we saw that they countered Israel's aggression with their own actions. Houthis did say, various naval actions. Hezbollah fired missiles in the northern Israel. So there was this unified front strategy. And after Israel kind of invaded southern Lebanon for the second time, this year, and it kind of weakened Hezbollah militarily, and that kind of, I guess, that had some effect on the downfall of Assad, because the military balance of power in Syria changed hugely after Hezbollah got fully bogged down in southern Lebanon against Israel. So, but if you look at Syria, the Syrian territory and the Syrian militias has been less active in against Israel since last year. There were some attacks on U.S. bases there last year, but there has not been the various the activities that we have seen in, like, in case of Houthis, in case of Hezbollah, or in case of Iraqi militias, that has not happened in Syria. But all members of, whether participant or not, all members of the axis of resistance has faced US and Israeli aggression. Syria was not spared. It was airstrike in Syria's capital Damascus, airstrike on Iranian consulate, which kind of started the direct conflict between between Iran and Israel, which is unprecedented in the history of the region till now. So, generally, current turns in Syria are seen as negative for Palestinian liberation struggle, as it weakens Iran's influence in Syrian government. It sealed the Hezbollah's exit from Syrian territories, and the rebel groups who have come in Damascus, HTS, I'm one among them. They have in their rhetoric have told that Iran and Hezbollah as their main enemy, the primary enemy. But we also seen just after downfall of Assad, Israel, who was already an occupying power of Syria. Israel has occupied the Syrian Golan Heights, as recognized by the UN General Assembly Resolution 242. Israel has widely expanded its occupation in Syria. It even came almost 25-kilometer till the 25-kilometer distance from Damascus. After the fall of Assad, they have destroyed every military, naval, and air force base or power that Syria had just after the fall of Assad. But all of these attack by Israel, provocations by Israel, has been gone unanswered in major respect, apart from one statement in UN General Assembly by the transition government. There has not been any widespread condemnation among the new ruling elites in Syria against Israel. Even I saw Channel 4, the British news channel, Channel 4 News, interviewing probably the current interior minister of HTS for the transition government. And the reporter was almost surprised that how he was avoiding the taking Israel's name. At one point of time, the British reporter, has to coax almost in the interview the official to say that Israel has taken some aggressive steps against Syria. So, but mainly the focus or the framework that within which the effect of Syrian civil war is seen in a case of Palestinian liberation struggle is that defeat of Iran or axis of resistance strategically equals to setback for Palestinian liberation struggle. This is a very general equation that if Iran gets weakened in Syria, that is bad news for Palestinian liberation struggle. But this, I think, this linear projection fails to capture the first of all the loose form of alliance that axis of resistance represents. Syria and Iran has been strategic allies since the Islamic Revolution in 1978. And even during the war between Saddam's Iraq and the new Islamic Republic of Iran, Syria provided vital assistance to Iran and was the sole Arab state to do so. So Syria and Iran had a different strategic interest, which has been maintained since 70s. So to kind of confuse this and with the Syrian interest or Syrian support of the Palestinian liberation struggle is not historically right, I think. Because one thing is that Syria, even before the Islamic revolution in Iran, Syria has been a staunch Syrian state, specifically, and Ba'athist movement in Syria has been a staunch supporter of Palestine. And even when Saddam attacked Iran and Syria came in to support Iran, the one of the primary justification gave by Hafez al-Assad was that Iranians support the Palestinian liberation struggle. That is the reason that they are coming. Their strategic interest is converging. So the relation between Syrian state and the Palestinian liberation movements and various Palestinian organizations is historically prior than Syria's relation with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So with this, I think I will go into the Syrian state's evolution of the relation between the Syrian state and Palestinian groups. The Syrian state has been very active in historic Palestinian liberation struggle over the years. In the aftermath of the ethnic cleansing of 1948, ethnic cleansing of Palestine 1948, which is called in Nakba, Syrian state gave a wide welcome to the Palestinian refugees who have come to Syria after they have been displaced by the Israeli aggression at that point of time. And it was quite exceptional among the Arab states who have given the Palestinian refugees opportunities in virtually equal footing, with to their own citizens. And see, in Palestinian refugees, the displaced Palestinians, some of them, at least some of them, quite literally flourished economically in terms of trade, in terms of other civil activities, in terms of involvement in Syrian bureaucracy, civil service. The one particular example for this is the suburb of Yarmouk in Damascus, which was probably one of the most versatile suburb in the whole of Damascus, and also a great shopping center, a great tourist attraction. And Yarmouk was mainly consisted of refugees coming from historic Palestine. But it is not to say that this was the case for everyone of the Palestinian population who came to Syria, because there were many camps, refugee camps, where the sanitation, hygiene, the educational opportunities were very much limited. But despite that, the Syrian state institutions, in civil service, its education institutions, even the military, took the Palestinian refugees under its fold with almost an virtually equal footing. So, Syria.
Shaunak, you have 1 more minute, please.
Oh, so this was one of the main point that I was wanting to convey. But one thing that
You can
comes.
come directly to the conclusion, Shaunak. Don't worry.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We
So
can
basically,
engage you in the Q&As. Don't worry.
okay,
Bother
okay,
about
okay. Okay. So basically, I will just take 2 minutes. Just two things I'm going to. That there were differences between Syrian state and the Palestinian politics. One was that during the Syrian intervention in Lebanon in 1970s, where Syria intervened with the Christian paramilitary forces who were in cahoots with Israel against the Palestinian refugees in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon. And there was also a thing that where the unionizing or politicizing political groups of Palestinians flourished in Syria, but they were not very successful in foregrounding their voice. They were marginalized in terms of the Baathist apparatus that governed Syria. So Syria almost made this approach as a guardrail, that you can do many things. You can do your political organization, you can do for Palestinians, you can do your political organization, you can do your trade, but you cannot go politically against the Syrian state. And which it is very important to point out, I think, that which Hamas did exactly in 2011, when the uprising in Syria, the civilian conflict just started in March 2011. After that, Hamas was pressured by Syrian government time and again to come out in open support for Bashar al-Assad. Hamas did not do that. It tried to diffuse the situation. Well, there were two views within Hamas. One was represented by Ismail Hania, who was much more welcoming to the rebels, and another strand which looked for political reforms. But the Syrian state chose this resolution of this conflict as a security measure, as a military measure. They did not engage politically with the opposition groups, and which kind of led to Hamas exit from Damascus in January 2012. Since then, Hamas has stayed in Qatar. So that was my whole point, and I guess
Thank you,
it
Shaunak.
was
You have
clear.
given us too many things to think about. Thank you. Okay, next up is Shanton. Shanton is a junior research fellow at the Center for South Asian Studies in SIS JNU. Shantan would be speaking on From Collapse to Consequences, the Fall of Assad through an Indian lens. Shantan, you have 15 minutes. Please begin.
Yes, sir. So just let me share my PPT. Is it visible? The PPT?
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So, very good evening to all of you present here. And thank you, sir. Thank you, Shoradip, sir, for always being a wonderful chair. It's always a treat to listen to you. Thank you, WPSA, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And thank you to my previous speakers for their insightful lectures. So, I will begin with From Collapse to Consequences, the fall of Assad through an Indian lens. The first argument was that I see that this entire presentation has been broken down into how the serious map has been changing, who are the primary stakeholders, and why the government fell, how it fell, and which party is supporting whom, and then we'll also look into it a bit amount of India's relation with Syria, because that has not been spoken about by any of the previous speakers. So when we see in the serious changing controlling map, we see that even before Russian intervention in 2015, Assad had a very weak regime. So 2011, the war started because of various reasons. But I will like to point it out later on. But there were very number of people who were controlling various areas. So you have a control of rebels and you have jihadist group like Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, Free Syrian Army. Then you have southern Syria controlled by Dara and Konetra. They were controlled by Jordan, Jordan backed militant groups. So you have always have a number of actors, number of proxy war taking place. So you see Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi, they backing a section. You see Syrian government being backed by Russia. Rush backed by Russia. You see Eastern Syria having Kurdish militias who are backed by USA. Then you see that Western Syria, Central Syria are backed by Syrian army, which is backed by Russia. Aleppo, you see which has been retaken multiple times by various factions, and recently fall of the government of the Bashar al-Assad started with Aleppo. So we see there have been a completely frozen conflict, and there have been various multilateral conferences to find a solution for Syria. We have the Geneva conferences, Astana Accord, but none of them found a solution. And then suddenly you see the government falling after 13 years of war. So who controls what in Syria? This is a map which I found very interesting. This was the map on December 3, before all the parties and the governments and the government fell and the map changed. So you see Syrian government forces, you see Kurdish backed by at one point USA was backing them, but now USA stopped backing them. And then you see the Hayat al-Tahrir, backing one section. Then you see Turkish aligned Syrian rebels. You see ICL also having a small section, and you see Israel captured Golan Heights. So the main actors in Syria, the Syrian, was the Syrian regime before the government fell. It was backed by Shia militias, Iraq and Russia. Then you see Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the umbrella militia, including the People's Protection Group, and then you see, they were also called the Syrian Kurds, and that they were hated by Turkey. So Turkey was also a part of the entire geopolitical axis, because they felt that the Kurdish wanted to topple the government. And you see Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they were backed by Free Syrian Army. So SNA, which was Turkish backed, HTS and SNA finally retook Damascus, and they formed the new government in Syria. So HTS, which has been pointed out with Shahal, a brief outlook on what is the HTS. They have they are led by Abul Muhammad al-Jalani, who was used to previously work for Al Qaeda. He's a very educated person from Saudi Arabia. A Syrian militant with a history in Al Qaeda. He emerged a close lieutenant, or Abu Bakr al Baghdadi. He was leading a contingent of Al Qaeda jihadis. Then he had a disagreement with Baghdadi, and he then shifted to form his own faction. And from his evolution, it has been always tried to distance itself from Al Qaeda to maintain his Islamic ideology, and it has been controlling Idlib for a very long period of time. And Bashar al-Assad wanted to capture Idlib, but he couldn't do it without Russian assistance. And Turkey wanted Idlib to be left alone, because they feared that any attack on Idlib can automatically result in Turkey having a refugee crisis with a huge amount of refugees coming to Turkish borders. So he built a parallel state in Idlib and established a strong presence in the region. And he was waiting there, waiting for an opportunity to capture power when the government is weak. So, the reasons for the militant attack was due to a geopolitical shift with Russia's attack on February 2024, 2022 on Ukraine, and its continuous preoccupation with Ukraine made Russia not very focused in this region. And then we also see a weakened Iranian support because Iran manufactures support to a number of proxies, which is Hamas, Houthi, Hezbollah, and we see the continuing crisis in West Asia with Israel has resulted in a number of assassination, number of bombardment, which has automatically resulted in a loss of support. Like Hassan Nasrallah, was assassinated. Ismail Hania was assassinated in Tehran. Then we had Qasem Soleimani, who was the IRGC commander, very famous commander. He was also assassinated. And we also see a vulnerable Syrian regime because they had lack of direct support from Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. So all this resulted in in the map of West Asia being changing. And so we see Assad's fall. Assad government fell, and with the Assad regime had to fly away on December 8th, if I'm not wrong, to Russia. And then a transitional government was created, and we also see Syrian reaction on the ground where people were celebrating. They were celebrating, that the fall of the government and Damascus being taken by the rebels. So why did it fall? Fall because the economy was already in shambles, because the GDP has been shrinking by 87% in the last 13 years. So from 68 billion 2011 when the war started, it was only 9 billion. These are the figures from New York Times. Western sanction has stifled already a deteriorated economy. Then the soldiers were very poorly paid. The government soldiers, they were very poorly paid, so they lacked motivation to preserve the regime. And the soldiers were very badly in shape because of the repeated Israeli airstrikes, which have started picking up after October 7, 2023. And so we see that repeated airstrike, repeated attacks has automatically weakened weakened the Bashar al-Assad regime. And we see there is no external support which is coming because all the external actors which were completely in support of the regime, they were they were not in a position to help the government. And so we see that in the current setup after the government fell, we see the four factions which are most powerful and most prominent. So one of this HTS, obviously led by Jolani. So it also consists of transitional jihadis like SNA, Syrian National Army, which is a Kurdish backed, which is not a Kurdish backed, which is a Turkish backed army. And we also see that Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the Kurdish backed, with the People's Protection units. They enjoy relative autonomy in the Syrian Kurdish provinces, and they're armed by US in the past. Then we also see a Syrian Southern Front, which is backed by Jordan. So it's a loose coalition of militias. They are offensive from the south and reach, and they all were also trying to reach Damascus first. Then we also see Alawite militias. So Bashar al-Rashid was from this particular group of Alawite, which has only 15% of the population of Syria. So they have captured a lot of militias in the coastal region, and they have been targeted by HTS, and they have been particularly told to cut off all links with Bashar al-Rashid, if they want to remain, if they don't want to get attacked by the HTS, and if they don't want to become an enemy of HTS. So they have been given very strict ultimatum. And so in terms of geopolitical implication, the geopolitical implication is very interesting because Syria's geopolitical significance is immense, because we see Russia's maritime naval base, as Shonak pointed out, in Taras, and an air base, which Russia still continues to control. At one point of time, even Bashar al-Assad was thinking that he will go to the naval base or the air base and stay there and try to gain back power. But Russia, told them to come to Russia and take an asylum. So, and Iran was also a key ally and conduit between Iran and Hezbollah. So Syria was continuing to be a very key ally for for funding various of factions like Hezbollah and Hamas. So follow Assad regime could disrupt Iran's supply in the region, weakening his deterrence. And it could also embolden Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was very much against the Syrian regime, because it was completely in support of propped up by Iran. So we see the Iran HTS and SNA coalition in Damascus. So Erdogan appears to have extended his influence from Ankara to the borders of Iraq, Jordan, and Israel. So Turkey can be a very prominent party and prominent member in the entire winner in the entire situation, because they have managed to have a very prominent SNA, which is backed by them, Syrian National Army, in Damascus. So the idea is that India has lost a very big friend, and which we will look into in very soon, that what will be the future of Syria. So this is a very question which has been asked multiple times. So no one knows for sure. to be honest. But if we go by the what has been how Idlib has been run for so long, which has been run by HTS for such a long period of time, the reports are not that great, because it has been seen that HT is also same amount of dictatorial like Assad was. They also cut back dissent. They also cut back debate, any type of democracy, and the southern militias which are backed by Jordan, who also reach Damascus, they also would want to have a share of, of power. So SDF, Kurdish militia, they will also want to retain his autonomy, because at one point of time, some section in the north were run by Kurdish militias, and and the government of Syria. So the idea was that as soon as the government fell, the Kurdish also wanted to expand their influence, and Turkey view SDF, the Kurdish militia, as a threat, as a terrorist outfit, and so it remains to be seen how the entire axis pans out. And we have seen from historical examples, like in Iran when Saddam Hussein government fell, we see the reports are not that great, because there was a lot of infighting between the faction, and there was no amount of regional stability, and not any faction could control the entire region. And you see that examples can be multiplied. Like you see after Gaddafi fell in Libya, the same thing happening. Multiple factions, they're fighting against each other, and the same thing which we see in Afghanistan. Like after Taliban fell, Islamic State and other factions, they started attacking it. So the argument is, when you don't have a common enemy, you start fighting between each other, and everyone wants a share of the pie, and everyone wants to have a bigger share of the pie. So that's where the problem lies. So now I come to a point, the India and the Syria. So because this has not been talked about by any of the scholars, and as a South Asian scholar, this is a very interesting topic to me. So we see the India has given 3 statements till now on Syria. So first was the travel advisory, in which the government of India told very clearly that Indian nationals are advised to avoid all travel to Syria until further notification. And the government had a very specific focus over the people in Syria, over the international in Syria, and they told them to keep in touch. And then there was a statement on development in Syria, in which the government of India underlined all the parties to maintain unity, sovereignty, territorial integrity, common words which we see in all press statements of India. They advocated for a peaceful, inclusive Syrian-led political process, respecting the interests and the aspiration of all sectors of Syrian society. So our embassy in Damascus was also in contact with the Indian community for the safety and security. Then we see another statement on December 11, which were talked about Indian nationals being evacuated. So some 75 Indian nationals were evacuated, and they included some people from Jammu and Kashmir. And so the government told that Iraq was the highest amount of priority, which we have even seen in various evacuation missions from Afghanistan, from Yemen, from various countries during the COVID-19, multiple countries. That government of India was the highest priority, even from Ukraine during the war, Operation Ganga. That to the safety and security of all Indian national abroad. So Indian national remaining were told that they will be evacuated to keep in touch with the Indian embassy in Damascus. So India lost a friend has been argued by Kabit Tanuja, Sudha Ramachandran, and even arguments by C. Raja Mohan. So the argument was that India's response to Assad fall, India was very cautious reaction, and it talked about the safety of national, which I showed you by the various press statements. But India lost a very key friendly ally, because Syria has consistently supported India's stand on Kashmir, recognized it as an internal matter. And even Bashar al-Assad gave a statement in 2017 to an Indian TV channel that both Syria and India are common victims of terrorism, which was a big statement. And even after Article 370, when the entire Muslim world was being mobilized by Pakistan to ramp up again India, Bashar al-Assad said that it's an internal matter of India, and every government has the prerogative to take any action to protect their internal sovereignty. And post Bashar al-Assad, India has fears that HTS will be more prominently supporting supporting the Turkish view. The Turkish view, is that Kashmir is a disputed territory, and Kashmir, it is supposed the most of the Pakistan view, because Erdogan keeps on taking up the Kashmir issue in every UNGA summit. So the argument is that they can take a more pro Pakistan Kashmir viewpoint, which will argue that the Kashmir is a disputed territory, and Kashmir is a part of both the nation, and more of Pakistan and less of India maybe. So, and there are also arguments from economic losses point of view. So economic losses argument is that ONGC and a Chinese company, they have a 37% share in a Canadian oil company which is investing in Syria. And ONGC is also investing in Tohrin thermal project, which is a thermal project, and it has already invested $240 million dollars as a line of credit. And then ONGC also has interest in oil and natural gas exploration of Syria, because in an energy security is a very big issue. And India also accords a huge amount of importance to the government of Syria, because we see in 2023, V. Muralidharan, the junior, who is a Minister of State of Minister of External Affairs, he went to Syria, and there was a lot of agreements, like we see agreements on student visa, we see agreements on easy access of visa, we see even agreements scholarships of students from Syria to come for UG, PG, and PhD levels to study in India. So there were arguments that their geopolitical shifts, which we see the week after Assad ouster, and Russia and Iran losing their prominence, can impact like, which both are Indian allies, can affect India's influence in the region, and India can have its energy security threatened. So, and we can also see Islamic militancy surge, because HTS victory can give automatically boost to the global jihadist network, and Pakistan can see this as an opportunity to put a long-term threat in South Asia. Like, they can tell that Taliban's impact in Afghanistan can be threatened. Like Taliban's, when they came to power in 2021, automatically gave a boost to Islamic elements in Kashmir. So similarly, we can see a threat to threat to internal stability of India by giving a boost to terrorist networks in Kashmir. By seeing the HTS victory. So this was my presentation. Thank you all for your patience, and you have been a wonderful audience.
Thank you, Shantan. Thank you for adhering to the word limit and also the time limit. And of course, questions and comments are welcome. We all know that. If
Mm.
you would stop sharing your screen, Shantan. Now,
Yes, sir.
I agree with what you have said, apart from perhaps only one point, which is I don't think India right now is really in a position to care about whether the HTS supports the Kashmir question, right? Because, of course, it will not. It's a fait accompli that it will not. And I don't think India would really care in the long run, apart from, of course, the energy security point which you have raised, which is quite valid, perhaps more valid than, the geopolitics of Kashmir. Now, I have had a few takeaways from the three presentations, and I congratulate all the three speakers. They were excellent. And I now open the floor for questions. Please keep your questions short and to the point, and refrain as much as you can from resorting to your own subjectivity regarding the presentations. Thank you. Questions are welcome.
Sir, I would like to add two more sentences. One is, please do not unmute yourself and just start asking question. Please raise your hand. Sir will
Yes,
ask your name, and then you go for the question.
sure.
Secondly, your questions are welcome. Do not engage in commenting on what has done, because that will actually make conducting the program a little more difficult. And also, sir has every right to disregard any question if he thinks that is not suited for the existing discussion of today's framework. Okay. Our chair has every right to take any question or to reject any question, and any question which is not assigned to any distinctive speaker, sir has every right to allocate that to anyone as he wishes. Thank you. Please
Got
continue.
to answer it myself. Anyway, um, Ujon, go ahead. Do I call you
Hi,
Ujon or Ujan?
Ujan. Yeah, that's right.
Ujan, yes, sorry.
Thank, yeah, thank you. I have two questions for the first two presentations. I am a PhD scholar in political economy at the University of Manchester, and my first question would be regarding the first presentation to Sahal. I don't know whether you mentioned this or not, but if you can elaborate a little bit, maybe on the Kurdish question and Rojava, and how does the current change in regime in Syria will have effect on Kurdistan and the Kurdish question. Yeah, that would be a really interesting point to know. Sorry, is somebody saying? Okay. And second question would be,
Go ahead and switch it off. Switch off your mic.
yeah, thanks. And the second question would be to Shaunak about the changing relations of the new regime with the Western world. And you mentioned in your presentation that there was that they sort of refrained from taking Israel's name in one of the BBC or Channel 4 interview that they mentioned. So there is definitely a shift in relations to the previously antagonistic countries, as it might seem right now. So how does Syria's relation with the more sort of liberal democracies, as they prefer to call it, in the context of the European Union and United States, Canada, how does that change? Will there be any shift, and does it have sort of any new repercussions on international politics? Yeah, that'll be really interesting to know. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Jan. Would the speakers like to answer, or they would like to get the questions first?
Yeah, sure. I can answer the question.
Yes, go ahead, Amit.
So it was regarding the Kurdish question. So regarding their autonomy, what we can see as of now is that after during the Damascus takeover, even the Kurds lost their territory in the northern Syria. So the thing what is happened is that HTS and SNA, the Turkish-backed rebels, have negotiated a deal with Kurds, and they have transported them in green buses to their other territories, Manbij and the Raqqa, and they have lost some territories in this takeover. And now they are consolidated in Hasaka, Raqqa, and northeastern areas of Syria. But their autonomy is in a tough situation because the leader Abu Muhammad Jalani and HTS have mentioned that they won't allow anyone to divide Syria, and it indicates that there will be further military intervention into the Kurdish areas because Turkey would like to eliminate the Kurdish autonomous areas. So that's what. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm.
All right,
Uh,
Ronak.
Thanks, Sujan, for the question. Basically, what I think is that it is very much transparent that the West has absolutely welcomed the development in Damascus. So they have lifted all the sanction on the terrorist sanction on the Jolani has been lifted by the U.S. Secretary of State, and all this. So yeah, there is obviously a huge change in Syria's relation with the West. But I think the relation between Palestine and Syria will also have to take into account what is happening in Gaza right now. And if the Syrian rebels need to have a regional credibility, they need to find an answer to that. And I think the politics will more likely go in the direction of supporting what seems more plausible. I am not making any predictions, but what seems more plausible for to me is that they will go much more closer to the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas and their initiatives rather than backing on Hamas. But it is also we need one thing that needs to be kept in mind here, that after Hamas left Syria in 2012, their main political backer in the region, political and diplomatic backer in the region, has been Iraq. Has been Qatar and Turkey. Now, Turkey has a definite stake in Syria, and Erdogan kind of has this projection about himself that he is this new savior of the old Ottoman Empire. So I don't know. With the politics will go on, will evolve. My point was that there will be a Palestinian agency in that. What happens? It will not be decided by some Iranian axis or some other axis, whatever. Palestinian will have their own agency.
Thank you. Thank you. I completely agree with Shonak on this point, I believe. Uh, can we move to the next person who wants to ask a question? Shubhra, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, am I audible, Chair?
Yes. Yes, yes, very much.
Thank you so much, Chair, and my sincerest gratitude to West Bengal Political Science Association for organizing this wonderful seminar come presentation. I actually have three questions questions for each of the presenters. I will try to be as brief as possible. I will not take much time. Can I put them forward, Chair, with your permission?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question is actually towards Amit Sahalji, for he introduced a very tantalizing proposition when he put forward a difference between political jihadism and Salafi jihadism. And my conjecture here is would he, what would his thoughts be on this dichotomy between political jihadism and Salafi jihadism in the context of stabilizing the situation in Syria right now? And does he foresee a break and another conflict, another protean dimension to this conflict re-emerging if the situation does not stabilize and political jihadism and Salafi jihadism find themselves on opposing ends? That's my first question. Thank you. My second question to Shonok sir is that when he mentions about the axis of resistance, does he take into consideration one of the points that he detailed a very extensive history? The axis of resistance also had a precursor in the 1970s, which was the axis of sectarianism, in which the Islamic Brotherhood waged a Sunni Islamist uprising against the Syrian Ba'athist regime. So, does he find that the current situation has a lot of influences of what happened in the 70s and in the 80s when Hama was sieged and there was a massacre in Hama in 1982? So how that sectarian difference and dissension will continue to influence and shape the situation on ground, I would request his comments on that. Thank you, Shonokda. And my final question is to Shayantun. While he outlined a very a detailed analysis of the situation with regards to India, I think when he makes that point that Russia is focused on Ukraine, I would like to know whether, if Russia was really focused on Ukraine, how come Russia did not withdraw from Syria with all its military equipment or en masse? As in, the Americans, when they withdrew from Afghanistan, they left their military equipment and withdrew en masse. But when you look at Russia, Russia still maintains a considerable footprint in Syria. Its military equipment is still there. Its embassy staff has been halved, but that's protocol whenever something like